What if the scariest movie you ever saw was not made up, but based on a single night, in a single room, in a single American house, where a boy's life turned into a battlefield between faith and something darker than anything the witnesses could name? This is the true story that inspired The Exorcist, the case the church recorded and the witnesses could never forget. The case of a boy called Roland Doe. Could you sit in that room and listen while strangers tried to fight the thing living inside him? It begins with grief and a bored January, late 1940s, cottage city at the edge of Washington, D.C. A quiet house, ordinary on the outside, full of people on the inside. A family, a teenage boy, aunts and cousins, a childhood that looks like any other, until the aunt dies. The aunt had been interested in spiritualism. She kept a Ouija board. She taught the boy how to use it, casually as many families then did, as a parlor curiosity, as a game. Or so they believed. He used it to ask questions. He used it to feel close to her. He kept that board in his room. And after she died, he began to use it more, alone, at night. At first, small things happened. A scratch on a wall, a shadow that didn't match anything in the street. The family blamed mice, or old house pipes, or imagination. But what if the thing you call imagination looks right back at you? The activity centered around the boy. The family noticed a pattern. The noises were louder when he was alone. The things fell or moved around him. Items would appear in places he could not possibly reach. He complained about voices. He woke in the night with the sheets torn. He told the family he had seen faces at the foot of his bed, faces that faded with the morning light. This is the point where we have to slow down and look at what the witnesses describe, because the horror is not always loud. Sometimes it is small and intimate. And then it grows. A mattress that shakes, a child who cannot be woken, marks that appear on skin, red and raw as if from nails. One night, the boy's mattress shook so violently that it ripped a spring. A spring was torn free of the bed by a force no one in the room could explain. Try to picture that. A metal spring jutting from a mattress like a broken tooth. And the boy inside, eyes blank, moving with a strength that was not his own. Neighbors tell of chairs sliding across floors, books falling from shelves, and a lamp that flew from a dresser and shattered. A cousin claimed the boy's blanket ripped itself free while the boy lay still in bed. A mother found scratches on the boy's chest and back that changed overnight. From small lines to letters, letters that formed words, words like hell and evil, according to the witnesses. Doctors were called, psychologists were called, tests were done. Medical professionals observed seizures, violent outbursts, and an upset that no treatment could fix. Some declared a psychiatric problem, others found no physiological cause at all. What do you do when medicine fails? When the test results are blank, and your child is being torn apart by something you cannot name? When science cannot explain, people turn to faith. That was the family's next step. They sought help from the local Catholic Church. Priests arrived. They came with rosaries, with prayers, and with a cautious skepticism that all believers sometimes have. They intended to help a frightened family. They did not expect the things their notes would record. At the first hospital attempt, a priest prayed at the bedside. According to the accounts, the boy convulsed. He spoke in voices that were not his own. He lifted from the bed with a strength that should have been impossible for his size. A metal spring was torn free and used as a weapon. The priest's arm was slashed. Blood spilled onto white hospital sheets. The ritual was stopped. The priest required medical attention. The family followed the priests to St. Louis, and it is here that a series of exorcism sessions began that would last for weeks. A group of Jesuit priests took turns. They wrote diaries. They recorded what they saw. Their notes are the backbone of this story, and those notes are chilling. Ask yourself now, would you stand in a room with a boy who can throw you across the floor and read Latin prayers until your throat is raw? Settle into the dark with me now, because these scenes are not quick and sharp. They are long and slow, and small details change into horrors. Night after night, the priests entered the room. They arranged chairs. They prepared crucifixes and holy water. Someone kept watch. Someone took notes. The boy was restrained to protect everyone, and every restraint was tested. Leather straps would burn and snap. Cords would stretch and break. The boy's body would arch into an impossible backbend. The sound of his scream would fill the room and seem to ping off the concrete walls. At times, his voice would change. It would drop into a tone that vibrated in the chest like a mechanical cough. It would speak Latin phrases the boy could not have learned in school. It would mock the priests. It would mimic people there, copying the voices of loved ones. And then it would twist them into insults. One priest later wrote that he saw the boy rise entirely off the mattress, suspended above it, while the bed legs squealed as if pressure had been put on them from below. Others testifying later described holy water boiling when it hit the boy's skin, as if some presence made the water seethe. Imagine holy water that boils on contact, but only when it touches skin, and your hands are cold and shaking as you hold the bottle. The boy's eyes would roll back, or the pupils would dilate into black hollows. His face would contort into expressions impossible for a child of 13. He would spit blood at those who stood near. He would growl in tongues that sounded like low animal sounds. And then, as if to prove the point, snap into a soft, defeated whisper as if nothing had happened. The priests, exhausted, sometimes slept in chairs by the door. They woke to the sound of drawers opening by themselves. They woke to the feeling of a presence standing at the foot of the bed. They woke to the knowledge that the thing inside the boy could be patient and cruel. Now we slow down and look at individual incidents recorded by witnesses, because the horror gathers in these moments. A spring ripped from the mattress, the witnesses said, and the boy used it like a blade. A priest's arm was cut deeply. He needed stitches. The wound was described as messy and surprising for how it had happened in a monitored hospital room. Blood on a white sheet is stark, and for those who watched, it felt obscene. Witnesses swore the boy rose from the mattress without any visible support. He hovered a few inches, and then, as if released, his weight collapsed back down. But the mattress and bed frame bore unnatural signs of stress. Screws were twisted, paint was scraped off bedposts. Marks remained that could not be explained by ordinary wear. If a boy levitates in front of you, and you are a priest who has sworn to protect souls, do you keep praying, or do you run? Latin phrases, precise and grammatical, came out of him at times. Names of saints, phrases of repudiation. The priests, who had studied Latin for Mass, recognized both correct pronunciations and deliberate mockeries. Who taught those words to a boy who had never studied Latin? At different times, words appeared on the boy's body. Witnesses described letters forming, raised and angry, as if carved from beneath the skin. The letters glistened as if fresh. The words were simple and terrifying. One witness reported seeing enemy on the chest, another said, exit, and still another said, demon. Their memory differs in detail, but not in substance. The markings were real to them, and that is what matters in this story. During one session, the boy suddenly spoke in a voice the priests later said was not his. It mocked one of the older priests, calling him by his childhood nickname. The priest broke down, later writing that the voice sounded exactly like someone he had loved and lost. It was a cruelty that no normal illness would have reason to commit. Each of these moments is small on its own, and yet together they begin to paint a nightmarish picture that erases ordinary explanation. The men who led these sessions were not theatrical thrill seekers. They were clerics. They were exhausted. Their diaries are full of small, human details, laughter to break tension, whispers of prayer, sudden anger, strikes of physical exhaustion mixed with cold factual observations about bodily marks and changes. Their entries read like field notes and like confessions. One priest later wrote that he thought he saw smoke that had no source. Another said he felt a cold hand on his arm though the room was hot. They feared infection, they feared scandal, but most of all they feared the thing that would not simply die under prayer. When a man of God says he is afraid, listen closely and imagine why. This fear was not limited to spiritual dread. It extended into the physical. A priest was thrown to the floor during one session. A wooden crucifix was snapped. A chair went flying. The men left sessions bruised and sometimes bloodied. Medical attention was needed more than once. They wrote letters home and admitted they were frightened in ways they had never been before. Their notes later became source material for books and for the filmmakers who would turn this story into cinema. But their private words, written at night, are the rawest pieces of evidence we have. They recorded facts, and they recorded feelings that had no normal place in clinical notes. After weeks of attempts, the final sessions were arranged at a hospital known then as the Alexian Brothers Hospital. The priests gathered there with a plan for a sustained ritual. They arrived early. The room was made solemn. Family members sat across the hall, sometimes curled on chairs, sometimes pacing, sometimes crying quietly. The ritual that night stretched for hours. The priests recited prayers, read scripture, anointed the boy, and used the tools of their right to pull at whatever held him. The air grew thick. People in the corridor reported feeling uneasy, as if a presence had stepped into the hallway itself. Staff sometimes refused to enter. In the final recorded moment, the boy erupted with a scream that witnesses said was unlike any human sound. It pierced through the hospital, made people stop in their tracks. The scream rose and then collapsed into nothing. The boy then went limp. He opened his eyes. He spoke in a calm voice and said words many have repeated in retelling the case. He is gone. If you'd been standing there, would you have believed your ears, or would you have waited for the other shoe to drop? Silence followed. A heavy silence. The priests felt a shift. It might have been emptiness, or it might have been relief. Whatever the explanation, the episode ended there in the recorded sequence of events. After the boy returned to a life many described as normal, the church archived the case. Names were changed, papers were kept closed. That secrecy only added to the myth, because what is hidden tends to burn brighter in rumor. Authors wrote books, reporters wrote articles, a film director read the accounts and imagined a script that would shock an audience in 1973. The Exorcist was born, and the public face of the case took on new dimensions, special effects, makeup, and a cultural conversation about evil and childhood that continues today. But for the men in the rooms, the story did not become entertainment. It remained a medical file, a set of handwritten notes, a memory that haunted some of them to the day they died. A number of journalists and authors have gone back to interview those priests and their colleagues. They repeat the same facts, sometimes verbatim, sometimes with small differences, but nothing changes the sense of strangeness at the core. Think about the men who stood in that room, their hands shaking over rosary beads. Will that image ever leave you? This story asks heavy questions, questions that resist simple answers. Is it possession, or a medical condition, or a combination of both? Could the boy have been acting, consciously or not? Could a culture of suggestion and fear have created the phenomena as a psychosomatic response? Or did something else, something outside our scientific language, move inside a child and change everything? We will not force an answer here. We will present the evidence as recorded, the witnesses as they remember, and the men who prayed as they wrote. You, the viewer, must decide. Which side would you choose if your loved one stood before you, eyes black, hands tearing at flesh? To understand this case, we must look back at the social world the boy lived in. After the wars, spiritualism had a surge in popularity. People used Ouija boards in parlors. They sought contact. They sought closure. They sought answers. Many did not believe they were courting danger. They engaged in a practice now woven into mid-century culture. But for some people, that curiosity opened doors. Historians note that such boards are often a focus in many stories of hauntings and possessions. The board is not a cause by itself, but it is a symbol and an access point in the narratives people tell about their encounters with the unknown. Think about curiosity as a doorway. Sometimes it leads to knowledge, and sometimes it leads to a hallway with no windows. We return now to human voices. A cousin remembers the boy as playful and shy before the events. A nurse later admitted she could not explain what she saw, and sometimes woke in the corridor with the smell of sulfur in her nose. The priests kept repeating the same small sentences in their diaries. I have never seen this. The boy's eyes were not his. We were frightened. One family friend said she saw the boy in a dining room sitting calmly while a lamp behind him swung gently, making a circle on the wallpaper as if an invisible pendulum had been set into motion. She had never been a religious person before, she said. But afterward she began to go to church. These testimonies are not all the same, but they share a common core. People confronted something they did not understand, and it changed them. If you met someone who came back from a thing like this, would you believe them? Or would you walk away? When The Exorcist hit cinemas, audiences reacted violently. People fainted. People left theaters. The film was a cultural shock. It mixed the mundane and the horrifying in ways that made the story feel possible in the most uncomfortable sense. The movie amplified the case but also transformed it. Special effects made levitation and head spinning memorably visible. The movie's success meant this private, traumatic event became a public spectacle. But the film did not create the fear alone. It amplified a fear already present. The fear that a normal child could become the site of something dark. It made the domestic space, the bedroom, into a place of cosmic battle. When you watch a film and it stays with you, you have to ask why, and sometimes the original horror is worse than the fiction. The Roland Doe case sits at the intersection of faith, medicine, and culture. It is studied by theologians and scoffed at by skeptics. It is told in coffee shops and in academic journals. It has mothers who whisper the name when their kids fall ill, and it has priests who say they will never forget the sound of that final scream. We cannot prove all things. Records are limited. Human memory is fallible. But the documents that exist, diaries, hospital records, letters, do point to a series of events that changed lives and made believers of some and skeptics of others. What scares you most in this story? The possibility of evil, or the possibility that we sometimes cannot protect the ones we love? Return finally to the bedroom from the very start. Picture the mattress, picture the spring, picture the hole in the quiet house that grief opened and the shape that stepped through. Picture a man of God at the bedside with a rosary in his hands, lips moving and eyes full of fear. Picture the final silence that followed the last scream. Ask yourself, as you lean close to the screen in the dark, did the priests save the boy, or did something else leave? One sentence remains. It is short and it is simple. Some people believe, some do not. But those who were there do not forget. If you could go back in time and be in that room, would you sit and pray, or would you walk away? If this story stayed with you, if it chilled you down to the bones, write what you feel in the comments. Tell me which part you could not sleep after. And if you want to follow up where we read the original priest diaries and mark the entries by date and time, subscribe and ring the bell, because the documents are darker than most people realize. Like, share, and leave your thoughts in the comments. And if you dare to hear more true horror stories, subscribe and hit the bell icon. The next story might be even darker.